Good morning. It's Thursday, March the 25th, and this is The Drill. Thank you. The Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare. Let's see here. Is from March 25th. The enemy will flee at your rebuke. Just as I rebuked Satan and defended my servant Joshua, so too will I defend you, my child, and will cause the accusations of the enemy to be harmless to you. I've given you the power to speak to the enemy with rebuke, and you will see him flee from you. I have promised that those who rebuke the wicked will have delight, and a good blessing will come upon them. Follow my instruction and learn to do good. Seek justice, rebuke the oppressor, defend the fatherless, and plead for the widow. I will rebuke the devourer for your sake, so that he will not destroy the fruit of your ground, nor shall the vine fail to bear fruit for you in the field. Prayer declaration. Satan, the Lord rebukes you. Let the enemy flee at your rebuke, O Lord, because the Lord strengthened me. I will rebuke Satan and cause him to cease from attacking my family and me. I will speak to the storm of my life and say, quiet, be still. And that is the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare. And my name's Ron. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. My name's Ron, and I'm the only true conservative in the United States today. I'll be reading from Russell-Kirk's book about conservatism, and also be talking about values. What are the core values of conservatives? All that when I come back. Thank you. I'm not going to read from the chapter 11 from Russell Kirk's book about conservatism, and this particular chapter is called Permanence and Change. The liveliest definition of a conservative is Ambrose Bierce's in his Devil's Dictionary. Conservative, noun, a statesman who is enamored with existing evils, as distinguished from the liberal who wishes to replace them with others. When the reflecting conservative is roused to serious thought and action, often he can move with a power startling to his radical or liberal adversaries. There are stupid conservatives just as there are stupid liberals and radicals, but conservatives really are not the stupid party. Burke compared the conservative English of his day to great cattle browsing under the English oaks, silent and seemingly stupid when compared with the myriads of radical grasshoppers chirping in the meadow around them. But when the real strength is in question, he added, the grasshoppers are as nothing by the side of the conservative cattle. Stupidity is one of the principal accusations against conservatives, though what it is meant by it ordinarily is simply that conservatives do not believe that abstract schemes of positive law and mass meetings can make this world of ours into a terrestrial paradise. The conservative is not opposed to progress as such, although he doubts very much that there is any such force as a mystical progress with a Roman P at work in the world. The permanence in a society is formed by those endearing values and interests which give us stability and continuity. Without that permanence, the fountains of the great deep are broken up and the society slips into anarchy. Change is essential to a good society, the conservative reasons. Just how much change, however, a society requires and what sort of change depends upon the spirit of the age and the peculiar conditions of the society in question. It is one of those faults of the radical that commonly he advocates immediate and perilous change at the very time when gradual and temperate change already has commenced. Some very important things, however, the conservative knows to be immutable, and he holds that it is highly dangerous to tamper with that which probably cannot be altered for the better. If one has to choose between the two, permanence is more important than progression. But often it is not necessary to make that choice. Frequently, we have it in our power to combine moderate and measured progress with the present advantages of established society. So much for the liberal. The conservative is a very different sort of being. The conservative knows that he was not born yesterday. He's aware that all the benefits of our complex civilization are the delicate creations of many generations of painstaking and sacrificing efforts. It is not by mere lapse of time that everything gets better and better when things improve. It is because conscientious men and women working within the framework of tradition have struggled valiantly against evil and sloth. Progress, though too rare in history, is real, but it is the work of artifice, of human ingenuity and prudence. It is not automatic, and progress is possible only so long as it is undertaken upon the sure footing of permanence. And that was chapter 11 of the, let me see here, the book by Russell-Kirk, The Concise Guide to Conservatism. And one comment that I want to make about it is that I'm a true conservative as opposed to what's being described in this book. He's not describing, it's not a concise guide to conservatism, it's a concise guide to traditionalism / being a reactionary or reactionism. That's what basically he's describing. When they're saying that conservatism is the stupid party, what they really mean is traditionalist. There's a difference between being a traditionalist, a reactionary, and a conservative. They're three separate different things. Although there's many people who describe themselves and or are described as traditionalist or reactionary and referred to as conservative, and they're not. Somebody that is traditionalist is hidebound and refuses to change, resists it with every molecule of his being. And a reactionary is somebody who does exactly that, reacts constantly. So they don't know what they're going. The pundits, Sean Hannity's classic example. Sean Hannity has absolutely no idea what his show is going to be about today until he reads the New York Times, until he reads the Los Angeles Times, until he watches CNN and MSNBC, and then he knows what his show is going to be about. Then he's going to react. The problem is that he is now run by the liberals. His show is run by the liberals. The liberals will decide what it is that he's going to talk about and how he's going to talk about it. A classic example of that is Nancy Pelosi. A year or so ago, she made the statement during a press conference that somebody in the White House ought to conduct an intervention. That's what she said, quote, unquote. Nothing more, nothing less. It was an ambiguous and arbitrary statement. But every talk show host in this country, every reactionary in this country decided on their own that she was talking about President Trump and jumped to a vigorous defense of President Trump. He doesn't need an intervention, a dibbity-dibbity-dibbity-doo. They spent their whole 3 hours or so talking about and defending Donald Trump against this so-called accusation. Nancy Pelosi yanked their cords. She played them like puppets. She decided what it was that they were going to talk about on their show. She knows she can't get rid of them. No liberal wants to really get rid of conservatives, especially when you can use them so easily. You come out and you make some provocative statements, and you can get conservatives to say and do whatever it is you want them to say and do. So that's reactionary. Then there's conservative. And the way we're defining everything here politically is in its relationship to change. Because politics is basically about one thing, change. Whether or not to change, and if we decide to change, how. So the third one is conservative. How do conservatives differ from reactionaries and traditionalists? Conservatives are not traditionalists. They're not hidebound and resisting change at all costs. They're not reactionary. They don't look to the left for guidelines on what it is that they should say or do or whatever. Conservatives are realistic. They know that change is necessary, but what they do is they make the presumption for the status quo. They say to themselves, what's wrong with the way things are? When somebody comes to them and says, what do we do about the poor? They respond, what are we doing now? And what's wrong with it? And if the liberal can show that there is an obvious case for change, then and only then do true conservatives go along with that change, helping to, of course, shape that change along the way. That's the difference between reactionaries, traditionalists, and true conservatives. Back in a minute. Thank you. One other book that I wanted to go ahead and quote from and read a little bit of is a book about SJWs, and that's the title of it. SJWs always double down. I've read from this guy, the author of the book is somebody who has a pseudonym pseudonym vox-day. I assume that's not his given name. His mother wasn't Mrs. Day, and she named him Vox. I think it's, again, a pseudonym. So that he's a tech guy, that he's into coding and various things like that. But he wrote books about SJWs, which are social justice warriors, and how they act and how to defeat them. So these are also a couple of excellent books that I highly recommend. If you want to get a good insight into tactics and strategies of the left and how to defeat those tactics and strategies, these are two books that you must have. So I'm going to go ahead and read from SJW's Always Double Down. Let's see what chapter from I starting. Oh, it's from the. Let's start with the chapter 1, which is SJW's or the second law. Let's try that one first here. Chapter 1, the second law of social justice warriors. Starts with a quote. What is social justice? Social justice is the equal distribution of resources and opportunities in which outside factors that categorize people are irrelevant. And that's from something called the Pachamama Alliance, whatever that is. At last, your long ordeal at the hands of the corporate inquisition is finally over. After 6 months of being interrogated by suspicious HR managers, defending yourself against false accusations, clarifying all the intentional misunderstandings and mischaracterizations, explaining away the ridiculous exaggerations, and enduring the cold shoulder from half the employees in your office, your boss has assured you that everything is good and you are in the clear. You're grateful, of course, since he's been staunchly in your corner since the first time HR descended on you like a thunderbolt for your alleged sins against diversity and inclusion. I'm going to interrupt right now and say that last statement, all of it is based on the idea that you're white. And again, if you want to strike the biggest blow against social justice warriors that you can ever strike, you go to human resources. When you've signed on with this corporation, you filled out your application, and you filled out other documents once you were hired, and one of the documents that you filled out was an optional. It said on the document that it's optional, in which you describe your sex, are you male or female, and your race. Are you black? Are you white / Caucasian, etc.? If you filled that document out, it was a mistake. Okay? You need to go to human resources, demand to get that document back, and refill it out, saying there's a little box says refuse to state. Check the box, sign it, and leave it that way. The only way that you can be accused of any of the things that he describes here, sins against diversity and inclusion. Well, who's that pointed at? It's not pointed out as Hispanics. Isn't it? No black person is ever going to be accused of sins against diversity and inclusion. Neither is a Hispanic, neither is an Asian person. Women, even white women, are generally not going to be facing those kinds of accusations. Only white men. So the first place to start is if HR calls you into the office and starts we've heard rumblings that you're being racist, then you simply say, I'm incapable of racism. You assume that I'm white. I look in my paperwork, look in my folder, my file, and you will find I have not identified myself as white. Furthermore, if you start slandering me, then that's what this is amounting to. It's a false, therefore automatically a false accusation. You're slandering me, and you'll be hearing from my attorney. Boom, the whole investigation has to come to a stop. Think about it. You can only be accused of wrongdoing, like I said, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, if you admit that you are white. You don't have to do that. You can simply put refuse to state, and you're out from underneath it. Anyways, back to the book. In the end, it turned out that it was all the consequences of a Dilbert cartoon taped on the inside of your door, to which one of the women in the office took offense. At least that was the only tangible offense that remained after a 6-month investigation failed to turn up any evidence of all the other crimes of which you were accused. So this also is I'm going to interrupt here, and it says that a woman took offense. There's a difference between saying, I'm offended, and that is offensive. One thing requires proof, the other does not. The first thing, if I tell you I'm offended, it requires no proof. As far as I'm concerned, it's self-evident. I'm offended because I say I'm offended. If I say that is offensive, that's a statement that requires corroboration, it requires evidence, it requires proof. Again, and I've said it before and I'll keep saying it, listen carefully. You want the argument to center around whether something is, in fact, offensive, not on whether or not the accuser is offended. There's no way you can win that argument. If you're trying to convince HR that this person is not offended, you can't win, and you know it. So you have to go to HR and say, is this cartoon offensive? And if so, in what way? Okay. First of all, you're on the wrong path because you assume I'm white. I haven't identified as being white. And if you doubt me, look at my paperwork. Secondly, this cartoon is not offensive. Ergo, there's no possible way the accuser could be offended. But again, you want to make sure that the argument is going, the investigation is about whether or not the cartoon is offensive, not whether or not ultimately the accuser is offended. Because you can pretend anything. There's no way anybody can prove you don't feel what you claim to feel. Quote, I really appreciate the way you went to bat for me, unquote, you tell your boss. And you're truly grateful to him. When everyone else looked the other way, happy that the wolves weren't out to devour them, your boss didn't hesitate to tell his superiors that all the rumors were ridiculous, even going so far as to provide a vice president with your travel itinerary and proving that you were in Canada visiting customers on the day you supposedly lingered at the entrance of your nameless accuser's cubicle too long and made her feel uncomfortable. You're pretty sure that if it wasn't for him, you'd be out in the street looking for a new job already. Quote, hey, you're a valuable member of the team, unquote, he assures you. Quote, I'd hate to lose you, especially over some crazy nonsense like this. All you have to do is attend a one-day diversity class and you can put this whole thing behind you, unquote. Diversity class? But you didn't do anything. Didn't they just confirm that you didn't do anything? Quote, why do I have to take the class now since they know I didn't do any of that stuff, unquote. He spreads his hands and shrugs. Quote, you know how it is. Sure, everyone knows you're in the clear, but this lets the CEO assure everyone that we take racism and sexism and homophobia and all that very seriously, and keeps the directors off his back. I mean, the official story is that it's all just a big misunderstanding, right? So they're having you take this class to make sure there aren't any more misunderstandings in the future, unquote. Quote, but there wasn't any misunderstanding. It was all just a pack of outright lies, unquote. He winces, quote, hey, I know that and you know that. Hell, everyone in the executive suite knows that. But they can't come right out and say it either, can they, unquote. Why not, quote, unquote. Quote, because if they did, they'd have to fire the woman who brought the accusations against you, and nobody wants that kind of trouble. Look, we all know there's something seriously wrong with that woman. But if they fire her, we're talking a wrongful dismissal lawsuit at the very least, and probably other employees getting upset and threatening to quit, other whack jobs manufacturing sob stories about how they were harassed or offended or whatever, and HR going nuclear. And if word got out to the media that we fired a black woman, forget about it. By the time it was all over, we'd have to rehire her and promote her to department head, set up a scholarship fund for disadvantaged youth, and sponsor at least 3 women in tech conferences. Unquote. Again, I'm going to intervene here and say, stop and think about the same situation if you had simply said, excuse me, because he says in here, sure, everyone knows you're in the clear, but this lets the CEO know that we take racism, sexism, and homophobia and all that very seriously. Okay. Let me see, a diversity class, and that was the other thing. The response you should be able to make at this point that puts this to bed, that kills this whole thing, is diversity class, but you're assuming that I'm white. Look at my paperwork. I didn't identify as white. As a matter of fact, I didn't even identify as male. So why should I go to diversity class? You're punishing me, and you're punishing me arbitrarily. You're worried about a lawsuit from the black woman. You should be worried about a lawsuit from me. So you can put that to bed for good simply by refusing to fill out that form. Don't fill it out. If you've already filled it out, go back and put in refuse to state, sign it, date it, and move on. And all these buzzards are going to fly right on past. Back to the book. You stare at him aghast. You can't believe that after putting you through 6 months of hell for nothing, your accuser isn't going to get so much as a slap on the wrist. Quote, so that's it. I get 8 hours of detention for doing nothing, while she gets nothing for lying about me? Isn't there something in the employee handbook about not bearing false witness? Unquote. Quote, HR just thinks that's the Bible. It's not actually the real thing, you know, unquote. He laughs bitterly. Quote, blessed are the freaks, for they shall inherit the corner office, unquote. Let me see. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it right there. The chapter goes on. But I've made my point. If you want to avoid a lot of crap in your life, one of the things that you want to do is maintain your privacy. You may be thinking, well, Ron, you're telling me I should hide. You're telling I'm a white person, and why should I hide my whiteness? Why should I hide my culture, my heritage? Why should I do that? No, I'm not. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you that what your race is nobody's business. Okay, when you meet somebody at a party, do you immediately ask them what their race is? No, it's none of your business. And it doesn't matter anyways. And that's what diversity, it's not even diversity, it's inclusion. That's what civil rights movement was supposed to be all about, being colorblind, so-called colorblind. Which means what? We just assume everybody's white? But that's another story. but the idea that we don't lead with race. We're not, that's a black person, that's an Asian person, and start stereotyping and, creating friction and problems. Although, for the left, I suppose that they would like or enjoy that friction for the purpose of creating their little revolution. But in any case, the point is that if you maintain your privacy wherever possible, because you never know, just blundering around life and casually letting people know, giving people information they really don't need to have can come back to bite you in the ass later on. It did me once in a personal situation. There's a person that I met that was a struggling psychotic. He was taking medications and he was seeing a doctor, but he was also drinking and he was doing this, that, and the other thing. And we were going to become friends, and I made the mistake of showing him exactly where I lived. And so then at some particular point, because he was psychotic and slightly paranoid. And so at some particular point, he decided that I had betrayed him in some way, shape, or form, and went from being a friend to an enemy. And he went ahead and showed me his displeasure by shooting out my windows with a potato gun. He would show up at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was my bedroom window. So I'm sleeping in my bed, and I remember the first time I woke up, and it must have been the breaking glass. And I wake up and I look and I see some kind of an object that I didn't recognize. I touched it and it was wet. And I thought, what the hell is this? Turn on the lights. There's glass all over the place and pieces of potato. Okay, and there is some kind of device that you can make that's called a potato gun. I think you use CO2 or something like that. But anyways, and that wasn't the first of it. He went on a terror campaign. And if I'd simply maintained my privacy and didn't bother to tell this guy exactly where I lived, I could have avoided all that. Maintain your privacy. There's no shame in that. I don't have to broadcast anything. I don't have to tell anybody who I am, where I'm from, what my background is, what my race is. It's none of their damn business.